Hi friends, it's Nicole here today with this Mama Elephant card featuring a custom stamped background with die cut windows. This also features some of my very favorite products from the June 2018 Mama Elephant release. The Bookworm stamps and dies, the Bookmark dies, which is going to be that hexagon shaped window, and then the Goodreads sentiments. We're going to start with a background here, and I'm going to take a previously released Mama Elephant stamp set. This is the brush strokes, and I'm going to create my own striped background. This is one of my favorite things to do, and the great thing about the brush stripes is that they're imperfect, which I really like. It's almost like you're creating your own watercolor-ish type brush stroke background. I am using one of the Mama Elephant pigment inks. You could also mix this up. I think it would be really pretty ombre, maybe kind of orange to yellow or something similar, or any color combination you like. I am using Buttercup ink. The reason I'm using pigment ink is it tends to work really well, or even better than dye ink, with solid stamped images. And you could definitely get a similar look with dye inks, but I would recommend using a stamp positioner tool like the MISTI or the Tim Holtz stamp platform to stamp them, because you may have to stamp the image more than once. The great thing about a pigment ink is that generally you can stamp it one time and you've got a perfect image. The ink is going to stay wet a little bit longer because it sits up on top of your paper. It doesn't really fade once it dries. So it's going to take a little bit to dry. You can definitely speed that up with a heat tool if you want to. Now, once I have my stripe background, and you can see it's totally imperfect, but I love that about this, I'm going to take this hexagon shape from the Bookmark die collection and use it to create cutout windows. What I love about Mama Elephant die collections is they generally come with an assortment. This particular set comes with not only the amazing Bookmark, which I know all of you are just loving, but there is a smaller tag or bookmark in this. There's the hexagon I'm using here. There's a thought bubble, which I have used on my bookmarks and a previous card for the Bookworm stamp set. There's a set of hearts, little mini hearts. You can see those there on my screen. I'm going to be using those today as well. A bigger heart shape, and then a bow. So lots of dies. You get a really good value for your money because there's so much you can do with this. I definitely want to encourage you to go over to the Mama Elephant blog and check out all the amazing projects that the design team has created with these products. So much inspiration there. It's just really amazing. Now, what I'm doing here, I left this in purposely because this is probably the question I get asked more than anything, is how I decide how to lay out my cards. And I always forget, or most of the time I forget, to keep that in the video. I usually kind of do that prior to filming a video. So today I left it in so you could see my process. So I'm playing with my stamps. I did have a general idea of what I wanted to do. I knew I kind of wanted to do a trio of these hexagon windows. I knew I wanted to stamp a sentiment kind of at the top and then around the other two windows for my card. The design team for Mama Elephant is definitely featuring or showcasing the Goodreads, the sentiment stamp set today. And I wanted to show a way to use multiple greetings on a card in a really fun way, and a way that feels very natural. I thought these went together beautifully, and I thought kind of using one around each window would really give a nice visual effect. So I'm playing with things, and you can kind of see how it evolves this way, how I figure out where my window is going to be, where my sentiment's going to be. I knew for sure that I wanted the having you as a friend is like curling up with a good book greeting at the top of my card somewhere. I really wanted it centered, and as I was working, I wasn't sure if that was going to work or not. And I ended up coming up with an idea as I was designing, as I was die cutting. I went ahead and die cut my other two windows first, that if I die cut a window off the side of the card, that I could probably center, or very closely center, that sentiment up at the top. And I ended up really liking that anyway because it felt more natural to me with the way the windows were laid out on the card. I did not want them lined up at all, mostly because they weren't going to be lined up perfectly, and if they aren't lined up perfectly, that bothers me. So I really like mine kind of random. So you can see here's where I decided if I just kind of scooch that over, I can die cut that off the edge. Now when I die cut it, it wasn't perfect, so I did trim down my panel just about 1/8 of an inch, so it's going to be slightly smaller. Now that cardstock behind this window, I went ahead and trimmed off camera. This is Lawn Fawn Vanilla Malt cardstock. It is my favorite ivory cardstock, and I really kind of like the slightly tinted cardstock back here, something that isn't going to overpower the design, but it does have a tint of color and it's not white. So that's why I chose to use that. By using my MISTI, I can stamp all 3 of my greetings at once. That is also something I really like to do. Now, because I used a pigment ink for the background, I wasn't really sure how a dye ink might stamp over this, so I used VersaFine ONYX black ink, which is also a pigment ink, and stamped that over my pigment inked background. Because my yellow, that Buttercup pigment ink, was still slightly wet, I was a little bit nervous that it might not stamp very well with a dye ink. Now I stamped my images I'm going to be using for my card on some Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is another question I have received quite a bit lately. What cardstock do I use for Copic coloring? I use the Neenah 110-pound weight Solar White cardstock. I used to use a little bit less heavyweight cardstock, but I have switched over in the last 1.5 to 2 years probably to the heavyweight cardstock, and I love how it holds up. I love how it die cuts. If you see me using a smooth white cardstock, this is what I'm using. So I'm coloring in these images. One additional image I ended up using that isn't featured here is the worm. And that's because as I got my images colored, as I got them placed on my card, I realized that second window, that one in the middle, was a little visually boring. It needed some more color. It's got a book, it's got the calligraphy pen, and it just needed something else. And the worm is really one of my very favorite images from that bookworm stamp set. I think he's really, really cute. I love that he has those big glasses. In fact, I featured 3 critters, or 3 images, I guess, on my card that have these big glasses. The apple, the cat, and the worm. These are all 3 probably my favorite images from the stamp set. It's really hard to pick because I love the bookworm stamp set. I think that I did end up using every image in this stamp set at least once on all of my projects for June that feature these 3 sets. So just really great versatile images. Plus, I think they would work on lots of other cards as well. Anything that isn't featuring a book or whatever, I think you could use for something else. Just so many ways to use this. Now, I have listed the Copic colors I'm using across the top of the screen so that at all times you know exactly what I'm using to color everything in. I'm going to die cut these with the coordinating dies, and then I want to pop up my top panel so that it's slightly raised. I like when I'm doing a window type of feature, it really helps kind of draw your eye in by popping it up a little bit. My favorite foam adhesive squares by far are these scrapbook adhesives, foam adhesive squares. What I love is that they are not super high profile. So even though I'm going to get that great dimension, they're not going to stick up so high that it's going to make this card difficult to mail. Now, I tend to go overboard with my foam adhesive because I don't want it to dip anywhere, but you probably wouldn't have to use that many foam adhesive squares if you don't want to. Just make sure around the openings they're nice and secure. Now I'm attaching my images with some bling glue dots or a tape runner. It just really kind of depended on the size of the image. The cat window opening, I put the book outside the window. Most everything else is inside the window. I just kind of tried to make it feel balanced. There's that cute little worm I was talking about. Now the hearts that you see, how I achieved that is I really wanted my hearts to have a more ombre effect. rather than solid cardstock, and I wanted them to complement and coordinate with my card. And how I did this was I took the same colors of Copic markers that I used for the apple. I colored them on my scrap piece of cardstock, excuse me, and blended them. All three colors are 30, 32, and 35, and then I die cut them with the Bookmark little hearts dies. So there you can kind of see on the right side of the screen where I've die cut them. I just blended the markers like you would blend an image and then die cut them. And I was able to get 6 hearts from that area. I think I only ended up using 5. I tend to like my embellishments in odd numbers. So that's how I used them here today. And I'm gonna just attach those with some glue dots. You could also use a little dab of liquid adhesive if you wanted to. The final thing that I'm going to do for my card once all of my hearts are in place is take glossy accents and apply this over the glasses on these cute little critters. I think that they really need the glossy accents. I love what it adds to the design. I like that it gives their glasses a glossy finish and really, really is cool once it's completely dry. I would give it probably about an hour to dry all the way. I know it looks really milky when you first put it on, but once it's dry, it's really clear and it's perfect. The Nouveau Crystal Glaze would also give you a similar effect. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this really fun card featuring some custom window cutouts and a stamped background, featuring stamps and dies from the Mama Elephant June 2018 release. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Mama Elephant stamps and dies you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.